Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, the place to come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker and welcome to episode 237, Paying the Price, Confronting the Consequences of Avoidance. Well, welcome back to this first month of the new year. And as you know, this month we've been talking all about letting go of everything that no longer serves us, things that are stressing us out, just getting in the way of who we want to be. So last week we got into how to work on emotional detachment. And this week we're going to be talking about its opposite and the cause of so many problems for folks. That is their struggle with avoidance. So I look at avoidance on a continuum, of course, from awful to not so bad. And I look at it as a control issue. As one is trying to avoid bad things from happening, avoiding emotional danger or real danger perhaps, and yet they end up avoiding many things in life with big, big consequences. We really need more than one episode to talk all through this, but we're going to continue to talk about this topic on the show, I'm sure. Now, you might find yourself described here, maybe even working on this stuff, and or people that you know and love as well. Either way, I think it'll be helpful. But before you do, and especially if you do struggle with avoidance, and if you struggle with other things we talk about here on the show, maybe it's time to get serious and really start doing some work on this. And my 12-module immersion course is the best place to do that, I think, because it not only takes the topics that we talk about here on the show, there's that and more, but it also gives you the structure and the guidance and the tools to actually make some changes. It's immersive, self-paced, along with some really fabulous group coaching and one-on-one with me if you want that as well. It gives you the system and the support you need to create what I call sustained change, real change in your life. So the link is right in the show notes. Go ahead and sign up and grab the early bird prices while you can. If you have any questions, reach out. I am here. Okay, let's get into it. So paying the price. Now, avoidance is, of course, a common human tendency that we can all have at moments that can get into any area of our life. And it doesn't matter how old you are, what culture you come from, what background you come from. And so typically we think of avoidance as procrastination, putting off things we don't want to do, but it's a lot more than that. It's very pervasive, especially in our relationships. We might end up avoiding difficult conversations. We, of course, are running from conflict. We put eggshells on the floor. We're afraid to address underlying issues with our friends, our families, our partners, our neighbors, our bosses, and our kids. Avoidance is all about not wanting to look at reality. It's about trying to control the outcome by not doing something, by not telling that person how we really feel, by not ripping the Band-Aid off and going to that scary doctor's appointment, by not making the phone call that you think is going to be uncomfortable, by not setting the boundary and asking for what you need, maybe by not looking in the mirror and facing yourself, maybe around some unhealthy habits or things you know you need to address. Avoidance also keeps us from looking at unhealthy relationships and situations in our life. And it keeps us from being proactive and taking responsibility. Unfortunately, when we're avoiding tough conversations and when we're not approachable, because if you're avoidant, you're probably defensive, at least a little bit. And so it's going to be really hard for other people to come up to you in a healthy way, I'm assuming, and bring some real issues to you if you can't handle it. And if you can't handle looking at reality, how in the world are you going to be able to have what I call the ego strength for someone to walk up to you and even gently confront you on some real stuff? And that's why I think there's a lot of shame and fear that meld together to create our avoidance. But the problem is the issues don't go anywhere, do they? We've all had the experience where maybe we didn't deal with something, thought we dealt with something, forgot to deal with something, set aside, and it came back with a vengeance with compound interest and or fees and or whatever is attached to it that isn't so fabulous. So the consequences only get bigger the longer we put that off, and we know that. The other thing we're going to talk about today, though, how emotionally that stuff piles up and festers too and creates bigger issues. Because if we're not addressing things and not addressing things and not addressing things, they don't just dissipate and go poof. They pile up. And it's really hard to have emotional safety and vulnerability and trust in our relationships when we're avoiding difficult things or even vulnerable conversations. Maybe they're not negative, but they're still uncomfortable. Let's talk about avoidance and the erosion of trust in relationships, because I think this is a huge area that we need to look at. And whether you're the avoider or you're partnered with an avoider, it's going to be a problem. Okay, so let's say you're the avoider. Here's the thing. They can't trust you. And this is hard because there are a lot of avoidant folks out there like you who are loving, kind, caring, try to do the right thing, and yet struggle to have boundaries. And it's awful for you to think, oh my gosh, people can't trust me. Are you kidding? I look at myself as so kind and caring and responsible. Well, you might be in a lot of areas, but if they can't trust you to have boundaries or to be able to face really difficult things, to deal with reality when it shows up, because it's going to, if they can't trust you to tell them the truth about you, about what you think, what you feel, what you need, they can't trust you, period. And there's no way around this. And this may make you squirm and be frustrated and angry with me, and that's okay. That's normal. I'd be worried about you if you weren't feeling some of that resistance. That's part of the process. The other downside is your own anxiety and insecurity. You can't feel confident and be avoidant. Can't be avoidant and feel confident. Because if you're avoiding important discussions, that's going to lead to doubt and insecurity because you go up in your head, and those of you who do this know what I'm talking about, and you spin and you have conversations with people in your head that haven't happened, that you're afraid to have happened. And the thing is, you can't feel confident if you aren't dealing with life directly and dealing with other people directly. Because if you're not showing yourself that you can follow through and show up for that and face it, to face other hard things, even though it's scary, if you aren't witnessing yourself being assertive, emotionally honest, setting boundaries, taking care of yourself, sharing your feelings, sharing your true feelings, not the people-pleasing ones that you think everyone else wants to hear. No, you share also when you're pissed, when you're hurt, when you're scared, when you're disappointed, when you're annoyed, when you're mad at yourself, when you feel guilt, when you feel shame. That's your truth right there. And so avoidance gets us into trouble big time, especially long-term in our relationships with ourselves and other people, I would say. So let's talk about consistently avoiding difficult things. Nothing gets resolved. Think about that for a moment. Nothing gets resolved or taken care of because it's too hard. And or you might be in a relationship where you secretly punt to your partner or other people in your family or other people in your work group or your friend group to face the hard things. Then you just go along. But you're not going to be able to get needs met. Not in healthy ways. You may act out. You may shut down. You may stuff your feelings and blow. You may be passive aggressive. You may take it out on yourself in lots of different ways. There's lots of ways to do self-harm. It's more than just cutting. You could eat badly, not take care of your health, not take care of your stress. You won't be able to problem solve and negotiate what's fair in your relationships. I don't see how that would be possible. And that is one thing that I've spent years helping partners do with each other. And you can't negotiate until you know where you stand first and are able to articulate that. It's going to be harder to make decisions together. It's going to be really tough to feel vulnerable and connected on a deeper level with a few safe people. And then how are you going to feel secure in your relationships if you can't do those things I just mentioned? And then on the flip side of this, what we often don't think about is how other people experience us if we are avoidant. How are we going to have the ability to feel and show empathy to them? That's going to be really, really tough. It's really hard to be defensive and self-absorbed, let's call it, and not sharing the truth with them, and then to turn around and have the ability to not only feel, but show empathy to them, real empathy, real compassion, real understanding. You have to have healthy separateness in order to do that. And along with that, you won't be able to honor their boundaries or their needs either, because we cannot honor in another what we are not honoring for ourselves. We can try to fake it, but it's just not genuine, and we can't sustain it. And let me get more dramatic. You will always feel that set apart feeling, that feeling alone, even around people. And that low level hum of anxiety will stay. It'll be not truly feeling connected to other people in a genuine and safe way. And I think it's because you're not being truly known for your insides. Because when we don't allow safe people to know our shame, our fears, our dreams, how can we feel safe and loved and accepted and that we belong? Nope, we're going to stack dynamite, we're going to rage, we're going to push people away, we're going to people please, we're going to be more often than not stressed out. Probably because we're in this constant fight or flight or freeze all the time, and that really takes its toll. So that is personal relationships. Let's talk about career and professional. You're probably going to avoid taking on new responsibilities, seeking promotions, confronting workplace challenges that everybody has. So you really might be keeping yourself from having your life look very different and much better, because if we avoid opportunities to grow and change and thrive. And speaking of thriving, we can often avoid taking care of our health and our well-being. Might avoid adopting healthier habits. Maybe we're not seeking the medical care we should, or our mental health concerns. We put stuff off out of fear, and we create bigger problems for ourselves and those around us later. Because being avoidant and proactive are two very different things, right? So when it comes to our personal growth, if we want to stay in our comfort zone, if we want to avoid risk and challenges, because we're trying to avoid failure and disappointment and all those things, but we're keeping ourselves from opportunities that could really lead to self-discovery and improvement. This means we're not looking at, say, our boundary issues, our unhealthy behaviors maybe, our unhealthy relationships around us. Because here's the thing, if we're avoidant, healthier people are probably hanging out elsewhere, let's just say. Because they can't deal with our avoidance, because it will come up and it will cause problems. And we're going to be avoidant internally too. We're going to avoid our truest feelings, maybe avoid dealing with trauma. We're not grieving, we're not being that vulnerable, and we're not going to let go of control. Again, we're still trying to stay in that trauma response. We're avoiding danger. And how this gets set up for kids, because if you're avoidant, you've had this for a long time, is really sad and understandable. And it really gets in the way of emotional maturity when we're grown-ups. And what about that learning? What about social learning? What about our social settings? We're probably avoiding a lot of social events where we don't think we're going to feel comfortable. So I think avoidance goes hand in hand with social anxiety. We're not going to do the networking we need to do or make new connections with people to expand our life. We'll avoid invitations to parties, gatherings, prefer to stay home alone because we're not going to be challenged. We're going to skip professional networking events or maybe conferences. And we're not going to spend the time getting to know people and socialize and build relationships oftentimes. So we'll find lots of ways to not put ourselves out there. And we're not putting ourselves out there because we don't want to be judged or hurt or disappointed or all the above. We avoid conversations with strangers, in a healthy way, like in the grocery store. We'll steer clear of small talk or interactions with new people at social events, so we're not getting to know people. It's usually on the other person who might be more outgoing to connect with us. We're avoiding opportunities to form new friendships or even deepen the ones we have. We're staying in our comfort zone. We want familiar social circles, and we avoid interactions with new groups. We don't introduce ourselves as easily in group settings or new environments. And we do a little bit of social isolation. Maybe even in our community, we're not getting to know the new neighbors. We're not stepping out and introducing ourselves or being there for them. And the other thing that people don't talk about enough is we also decline the social support. Like maybe we have a really challenging thing going on and we have a neighbor say, hey, whatever you need, I'm right here. And we don't take them up on that. We don't let them in. We don't reach out for guidance to too many people. We try to solve a lot of things by ourselves and usually not too well. And here's the thing, especially because we're going to have a hard time making difficult decisions, especially left to our own devices, because we struggle with avoidance. So one of the things that avoiders tend to do is do a lot of escapism. Everybody does a little bit, but I just want you to think about how often you do this kind of stuff and at what times do you think you're doing it? Like, how are you feeling uncomfortable, which leads to doing this, and how it might be getting in the way. So we might do scrolling, gaming, cleaning, doing, shopping, working out. We could use anything to avoid. But typically, it's things that we can get sucked into and not realize how many hours have gone by. We can look at our phone at a social gathering instead of putting it away and forcing ourselves to talk to people. We can, instead of getting the things done on our to-do list, go scroll on our phone or the computer or hit the video game or clean out the fridge because we don't want to deal with a couple phone calls that we know we need to make and the ones that are going to be hard. Okay, so where does this avoidance come from? Well, it comes from childhood. Kids learn, and we've talked about this before, that either the moment with mom and or dad and siblings is emotionally safe or it's not. And when it's not, they might have had experiences where it was really bad, like trauma, like physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, or all the above. Maybe they witnessed a lot of awful conflict where they weren't harmed, but it was really scary to see mom and dad fight, let's say, or dad and older brother. And so the moment got scary. So did not being perfect. Maybe you couldn't bring home less than an A. Maybe you weren't allowed to spill the milk and not get yelled at. Maybe you weren't allowed to make mistakes. Maybe there was a lot of shame that came up around stuff and probably unearned guilt. Maybe you didn't receive the healthy mirroring for yourself to where you trusted your thoughts and your feelings and your choices and your beliefs because your parents were healthy enough to help you do that. Maybe avoidance was modeled to you. You watched your family not deal with stuff. Not deal. Alcoholic homes are famous for this, where no one talks about the dysfunction. They don't deal with it directly. They don't do the hard things, and everything plus the furniture goes under the carpet. There's a million other reasons why you could be struggling with avoidance. But the key is, it's the struggle to accept reality and take the risk and let the chips fall. And for that to be okay, and to not be in control of all the outcomes. To not be in control of how other people see you. To not be in control of how you might feel in the moment. There's a million things that we can try to control, even in one moment. So if you struggle with avoidance, you came by it honestly for self-protection. And it is one of those things that's difficult to work on for people, but doable. I watch people do it every day. It is so worth it to deal with avoidance. And I watch people's self-esteem just increase. Because you can't be avoidant and have great self-esteem. I don't care what anybody says. Think about all the missed opportunities, all the regrets, all the things you didn't confront, all the truth you didn't say, all the things you ran from or hid from, all the relationship issues around communication and trust and emotional intimacy, all the nasty conflict that happened because you were avoiding healthy conflict for weeks and weeks. All the times you felt like crap because you knew deep down you were not reliable or trustworthy because you couldn't handle reality. And then underneath of that, you're yearning to be able to really show up for life, confront it, face the hard things, do the things for yourself that you've always wanted to do, have your insides match your outsides, and feel good about yourself. The more we face and address and clean up and own and express, the more confident and grounded and happier I think we feel. So how do you work on this? Well, you probably can't do this alone. And if you have trauma back there, I really encourage you to grab some therapy first. Then once you work through some hard things, grab some coaching, grab the course, grab our Facebook group. It's a great place to have some folks around you who get it, who aren't going to judge you, and they're going to lovingly hold your feet to the fire to honor yourself. So the first thing, of course, is awareness and mindfulness of what's going on in the moment for you. Like, why am I afraid? What am I feeling? Does it make sense? Why do I not want to make that phone call? Oh yeah, that's right. I'm scared. I don't want to be yelled at. I'm afraid that person's going to be so pissed at me. I don't know if I can handle the shame and the guilt coming up. Like all those kinds of things. Honor it. Honor what you feel. Don't beat yourself up for feeling those things. Anyone would feel those things. And, not but, start making a short list of things you want to start addressing and taking care of. And I encourage people, start small and start safe. Right? You want to do the gradual exposure to doing these things, and you have to build up some muscle memory and some strength and some confidence. And you got to tackle your fear little by little. Don't worry. You hear me say all the time, and it is true. Tackle things that you think you could probably see yourself doing today. That's going to empower you to do more, and you're going to want to do the bigger and better things later, I promise you. You learn how to be uncomfortable and being okay being uncomfortable, and understanding that the wonderful payoff of facing things, of facing yourself, is going to eventually far outweigh the anxiety of facing it. I want you to think about challenging your negative thought patterns. I have a part in the course working on the self-concept area where we talk about negative self-perceptions and how they pretty much run our life if we let them. So we want to look at irrational thoughts, and we want to be more realistic, have a healthier mindset. We want to do a lot of self-compassion. A lot of things like meditation, self-care, working out, deep breathing, quiet time to think. We want to think about what is on the other side of your discomfort. What would be some of the wonderful things that you could have in your life, and or the things that you don't want to have, get rid of in your life, if you were more courageous? Start sharing your challenges and your discomfort with safe people. Try to get a sense of connection and understanding and encouragement so that you know you have a safe place to land as you're struggling to work through this. Our Facebook group is a great place to do that. I also think visualization can be really, really helpful. Just, when you have a moment throughout your day, just visualize yourself tackling that thing and how good that feels. The relief that comes, the self-confidence that kicks in because you're dealing with it. Keep doing that and doing that and doing that. If you do that often enough, your brain will convince you to say, yeah, I can do that. I've already kind of done it, because it doesn't know you've just been visualizing. Look at your self-talk. Make sure it is realistic, but positive. You can say things like, this is really going to be one hell of a challenge, but I really want to do it. And I think I can do it. I think if I get some support, I can do it. I think if I just get started, it's not going to be as scary. And I want you to think about times where you had to show up because you didn't have a choice. And sometimes it's better for us, as awful as that can feel, like it's sink or swim time. And you did that. And you showed up and you dealt with stuff because you can. You're just afraid that you can't. I also think that the more you work on boundaries, self-esteem, loving yourself, honoring what you think, feel, and need, you're going to feel more confident and more able to start dealing with things head on. It'll come. Okay, so today we looked at the pervasive nature of avoidance in our lives. And we talked about its impact both on our relationships and our social situations and our self-esteem. We talked about the consequences of evading difficult conversations, how it just leads to a communication breakdown, leaves unresolved issues on the table, and a gradual erosion of trust in our personal and our professional relationships. We looked at how we can skip social events, we can avoid networking opportunities, and we can sidestep conversations that really could change our life by opening us up to meeting new people. We looked at these patterns, we talked about where they came from, and then we talked about ways we can begin to tackle it. So if you struggle with avoidance, or if you know someone that does, know that it must be tackled at a deeper level along with behavioral changes in order for it to get better. And it takes time, but it's worth it work. And you do a little bit at a time, and you build confidence as you go. Okay, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you struggle with avoidance, get the course, talk to me, get a coach, do something, because you deserve to have a lot less anxiety and a better life. Grab the newsletter at ownitpowercast.com. That comes out every Tuesday and gives you all the great info that you need and all the information on upcoming classes and everything else. All right, so pay it forward, keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you could begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.